Keeper of the Lost Cities, Exile, Chapter 45. The force of the void was so strong, Sophie felt like her body was pulled and stretched and twisted. It didn't hurt. She honestly couldn't feel anything except a tugging and twirling as she whipped through the cold emptiness. Sylvie filled her mind with a crisp image, a lush meadow surrounded by snow-capped mountains. Then white light flashed and thunder cracked and everything squished back together, leaving her in the middle of a valley, staring at the same mountains she'd seen in Sylvie's thoughts. "Whew," she breathed as Sylvie touched down on the glassy floor, right next to the misty river. If she hadn't been able to feel tiny drips of the cold water splashing her skin, Sophie might have thought she was hallucinating. She clung to Sylvie's neck with all the strength she could muster, afraid that if she let go, Sylvie would fly away and leave her there. Wherever there was. "What was that?" she screamed, hearing her voice echo off the valley walls. "Did we just—" Sophie didn't even have a word for what had just happened. 1 second they'd been at Havenfield, and the sky tore open, and now they were somewhere else, and it definitely hadn't been a light leap. "Free!" Sylvie told her, leaping down to take a drink. Sophie stumbled forward, and only her death grip on the alicorn's neck saved her from toppling headfirst into the rushing river. But she still wrenched her legs as she landed to her feet in the shallows. "What did you do?" she transmitted as she waded back to dry land, her soggy shoes squished with every step. A sound echoed through her head, and it took a second for her brain to translate the word. "We teleported?" Sylvie whined. Sophie didn't even know that was possible, though she supposed it explained how Sylvie had visited so many places, and why alicorns were so elusive. It was hard to catch something that could rip an opening in the sky and vanish into it. A wave of panic hit her as she considered what must have looked like to the council, or what they must be thinking now that she'd disappeared. "You have to take me back!" Sylvie munched on the long stalks of grass. "Free!" Sophie looked around for some clue to tell her where they were, but all she could see was that they were in the middle of nowhere, and that it was breathtakingly beautiful. She could understand why Sylvie didn't want to go back to Havenfield and be caged again. Something about the pen must keep her trapped. Maybe there wasn't enough space for her to get up to speed to teleport. That would explain why she'd seen Sylvie dipping and diving sometimes, trying to get away. But they had to go home. Grady was probably having a heart attack. How could she convince the stubborn horse to take her home? She couldn't exactly teleport them back on her own. Or maybe she didn't need to. There was more than one way to leap around the world. She grabbed her home crystal and held it up to the sunlight, imagining her consciousness wrapping around Sylvie's glimmering body. Before Sylvie figured out what she was doing, she pressed her palm against the horse's neck and stepped into the light, letting the rushing warmth whisk them both away. To say Sophie arrived back at Havenfield to pandemonium would have been understating things greatly. Bronte was screaming at Grady. Grady was screaming at Sandor. The counselors were screaming at each other. The only one not freaking out was Keith, who was also the first one to spot her. He gave her a thumbs up and she tried to smile, but everything was spinning and blurring, and her ears were ringing. Her head was throbbing and her body felt too heavy for her weary legs. Sylvie whined, and the screaming quadrupled as everyone noticed them and shouted something like, "Where have you been and what are you crazy? What the happened?" Sophie couldn't answer. She didn't remember falling, but she did feel the pain as she hit the muddy ground. "Somebody call Elvin," Grady ordered, and she was surprised to realize he was cradling her in his arms. "I'm taking her up to her room." "I'm fine," she promised, but she didn't feel fine, and she knew that Grady was going to say, even before he said it. She could tell from the worried look everyone was giving her, especially Keith. "You're not fine, Sophie. You faded again." "Looks like you get a new accessory," Elvin told her as he handed her the blue vial of the special limbium-free fade fuel, strung to a cord. He squeezed the atomizer on the end, and she inhaled the medicine before he tied it around her neck. How you can fade with 2 nexus is beyond me, but at least you got your color back quickly this time. I want you to inhale a dose of this every time you leap, just to be safe. I'm sure the fading only happened because of the teleporting, she said, trying to convince Alvin as much as herself. Maybe, Alvin agreed. Though I have to say, teleporting? Will you ever stop being full of surprises? That was Sylvanie, not me. She climbed out of her bed and checked her reflection in the mirror. Whoa, what happened to you? Bertina asked, and Sophie jumped back to get out of range. Clearly, her color wasn't all the way up. Grady opened the door a crack and peeked through. You're up. Can't keep the girl down, Elvin said as Grady ran across the room and strangled Sophie with a hug. You can't disappear on me like that, he told her. Never again. I won't, she promised. He cleared his throat and let her go, wiping his eyes and cape. Are you up to facing the council? You obviously have some questions. Sophie nodded, though she had no idea what she was going to say. Did this make it worse? She whispered. It definitely didn't help, but once you talked to them, hopefully. He left the thought unfinished, and Sophie had no choice but to follow him down the stairs and back outside where 12 very serious-looking counselors and a smirking Keith were waiting for her. Are you all right, Miss Foster? Counselor Emery asked, and the crease between his brows made Sophie wonder if he'd switched to the Sophie must be malfunctioning camp. Yes, she said, glad her voice sounded strong. Teleporting just takes a lot out of you. The word unleashed an explosion of questions, most of which she didn't know the answer to. She gave them what little information she could, and they switched to arguing among themselves again. Friend? Sylvie transmitted, and Sophie tensed, realizing she'd forgotten all about the finicky Alicon. She spun around, relieved to see Sylvie safely cantering around her enclosure. How did you? Keith calmed her down and lured her to a pen, Grady answered. Clearly she responds well to empaths. Or maybe Sylvie just has good taste, Keith said, stepping close enough to lean in and whisper. Just so you know, you're pretty much my hero now. It takes serious talent to freak out the entire council. I may need you to give me some pointers. Sophie rolled her eyes. Though I got to say, you look much better with color, Foster. The faded look, his smile vanished. Well, don't do it again, is all I'm saying. Sophie squeezed the vial hanging from her neck. I won't. It's quite remarkable, isn't it? Counselor Derrick interrupted, making everyone turn to him. All these centuries we've had an Alicon in our custody, and we never knew its secrets. But now, thanks to an uncannily talented 13-year-old girl, we've discovered the first animal with a special ability none of us has ever developed. The world will never be the same. Everyone murmured the agreement. What did teleporting feel like? Kendrick asked. Before Sophie could figure out how to respond to that. Did it hurt? Not really. It was kind of like I was a rubber band being stretched as thin as I could go before I snapped back into form once we got there. And if you were going to ask, I don't know where we went. Some valley in the middle of nowhere. They pummeled her with more questions until Grady finally stepped in and reminded them that she'd had a very exhausting day and they could continue this conversation later. Sophie knew she should be relieved, but the glare Bronte gave her as he leaped away told her she had not satisfied his doubts in her abilities, and she couldn't even blame him. She was starting to doubt them herself. The rest of the counselors slowly glittered away. Keith elbowed Sophie. I guess that's my cue to leave too. He dipped an exaggerated bow and held his crystal up to the light, saying, I'll see you tomorrow, Foster, as he leaped home. Grady rubbed his temples. So, Keith Sensen. What about him? What about Dex? What about Dex? Grady held out his hands. Never mind. We should head back inside. Elvin said he wanted to check you again before he leaves. Someone cleared their throat behind them, making Sophie and Grady turn. Counselor Terrick? Grady sounded as surprised as Sophie felt. I thought you'd left. I had, but I realized I forgotten to say one thing to Sophie. When he didn't continue, Grady said, I guess I'll wait in the house. Sophie watched him walk away, trying to guess what Counselor Terrick could possibly want. She hoped not another destroying session. Can I see your importer? He asked, when Grady had closed the door. Sophie dug it out of her pocket and handed the silver square to him. He flipped it over to the dull side and pressed his finger in the center of the square, holding it there until the imparter flashed with a deep green light. Permission granted, he said, and the light turned blue. There. Now you'll be able to reach me. Just say my name, and if I'm within range, it will hail me. Thank you. I know that you used to rely on Alden when you needed advice, so I want you to know that you are welcome to come to me any time. Don't let the fact that I'm a counselor make you feel like you shouldn't bother me. I'm always here for you, Sophie. She nodded, feeling dazed as he pulled out his pathfinder and leaped away. What did he want? Grady asked as soon as she set foot in the living room. I'm not sure. I think he just wanted to help me. Help you? He said he wanted me to go to him with the kind of things I used to go to Alden with. He even adjusted my imparter so I can call him whenever I need. You can come to me too, Grady said quietly. I know you had a different kind of relationship than you and I do, but I'm here for if you need me for anything. Even if it's about the black swan. She bit her lip as his eyes narrowed, wondering if she'd pushed too far. But when he answered, he said, Yes, Sophie, I still don't trust them, but that doesn't mean you can't come to me. I promise I will try to be objective. Okay? Okay. She was halfway up the stairs before he added, I would be careful, Sophie. I'm sure Counselor Terrick means well, but that won't change the fact that as a counselor, he's bound by our laws at all times. If you ever asked him about something that turned out to be illegal, you could end up in a mess of trouble. A lump found in her throat as she imagined another tribunal. I'll be careful, she promised, and she would. But as she made her way to her room, she realized that she finally had a way to track her old journal down. So as soon as Elvin left, she pulled out her imparter, needing a second for courage before she gave the command. Show me Counselor Terrick.